out targets by local governments. It's exactly 3 o'clock now, so I will start the webinar with a short introduction. The webinar of today is recorded. We have the function of question and answer. Please post your questions in the Q&A box. The questions can be upvoted, so you can privilege some of the questions that you will show up. We don't take any quotes. Please, we only answer questions. We limit it also in time, so to respect the time from all speakers. So it's maximum 5 minutes or limited to 5 questions. All participants will receive after the webinar the link and inclusive the available made presentations from our speakers. The speakers, they speak on behalf of their own findings, viewings and publications on this webinar and not necessarily represent the views or policies of AVERE or its individual participants. Always important to share this information. And then brings me automatically to our introduction of today's topic. So we have seen the last year that more and more governments on national level, on regional or even on city level, start to have a phase out of the combustion engine in their region, in their city. This is started in Norway by 2025 already, and it's followed by different countries 2030 up till 2040. However, the speakers that we have invited today, they talk about their city or region, which they represent, because also they have been looking on the phase out of internal combustion engines. And we also know why we do this, because we want the cities more livable, cleaner, especially on clean air. And it's not only about the topic from phase out of the combustion engine, but also looking at the alternatives. What can we bring as alternative? Is it shared mobility? Is it more bicycles? So let's kick off with one of our first speakers, and she comes with an introduction video that I will kick off right now. Here we go.
Rotterdam, a city that is continuously growing, but where space is becoming scarcer. Climate change has also forced the city to make smart choices. To give the city the brightest future possible, the city of Rotterdam is working on an innovative approach to traffic and transport. The past few years have seen an increase in the number of cyclists and pedestrians in Rotterdam, and a decrease in cars driving in and out of the city. That's why the municipality is changing how the available space is allocated to different road users. This means more room for cyclists and pedestrians, and more room for living.
In Rotterdam, we take the health of our inhabitants seriously. Air pollution is a major health risk, and that's the reason why making the air cleaner is one of our top priorities.
It's quite important that we in the Netherlands meet the climate targets that we agreed on in Paris in 2015. That means that we need to reduce carbon dioxide by 50% in the next 10 years. That is a real challenge. And 30% of the CO2 comes from transport and 20% comes from car traffic. So in Rotterdam, we stimulate people to use more sustainable forms of mobility.
The city is raising awareness of various clean alternatives to short car rides. For example, Rotterdammers can use different electric shared vehicles or public transport, or hop on their bikes, of course.
I like to use shared vehicles because they're always around and always available, so that's easy for me.
Through this program, the city of Rotterdam works to promote emission-free motorized transport. For example, the city is purchasing electric vehicles for its own fleet and working together with the logistics sector to introduce a zero-emission zone for city logistics by 2025. To encourage people to switch to emission-free transport, the city of Rotterdam will be rolling out a robust and efficient network of public charging points. Local air quality is improving. Good news for the health of all Rotterdammers. And carbon emissions in the city are decreasing too, which can help us counter climate change. The city of Rotterdam is saying goodbye to fossil fuels.
in Rotterdam, we are committed to fight the climate crisis. And that's the reason why, together with more than 100 companies and organizations, we've made the Rotterdam Climate Agreement. And a crucial part of this climate agreement is the electrification of our vehicles.
The city is making the transition as a community and in all sorts of areas to sustainable power.
I'm proud that Rotterdam, my hometown, is one of the front runners in sustainable mobility. Nowhere in the Netherlands you see more forms of sustainable mobility than here. Nowhere you see more shared cars, electric scooters than here in my hometown Rotterdam, and I'm very proud of that.
So this brings us to the first speaker of today, Mrs. Lutke Lindeman. Welcome. Also, thank you for the video. I will share your presentation. 1 second.
Yes, I can already start.
Please go ahead.
With telling who I am. My name is Lutke Lindeman and I work for the Sustainability Department of the City of Rotterdam. And I'm responsible for the program towards zero emission mobility, where I'm going to tell you about. Here's the presentation. So the next slide, please. And we have got a transport, an urban mobility plan, a sustainable urban mobility plan, you could say, where we, next slide, please, where we work on the national target, which is also the local target, and the European target to, and not anymore the European target, to cut off 49% CO2 emission from 1990 to 2030. And 1/3 of the CO2 emissions in our city and 1/4 of the air pollution in urban areas is caused by mobility. And we made a translation from the Trias Energetica to the Trias Mobilica, where we work in the Rotterdam Urban Traffic Plan. We work on volume control, where we prevent unnecessary trips with an ICE vehicle. We work on model shift, where we work towards a shift from ICE cars to public transport, walking, biking, and sharing cars, and where you still need to go with a car or with a freight vehicle. We work towards zero emission vehicles, where we work on the volume control and model shift. That's more the traditional mobility approach, and the zero emission mobility is more the technical part, where we work on the clean fleets and the charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. We worked out with our big research institute, TNO, 2 or 3 years ago, what our policy does for CO2 emission. And it's very small, but I will talk you through the slide. At the left end, you see the CO2 emissions in 1990. On the most right end, you see where we want to go to. So our ambition to cut 94% of it. And in the middle, you see all the measures. On the left hand, the European measures. So the CO2 emission measures from the European Commission, which is really big part of our aim. So you see the European bronbeleid, I don't know the English word, but the exhaustion measures, I think it's translated, for heavy duty trucks, which is really a big measure. And for example, the zero emission buses locally are a much smaller part. So big measures on a bigger scale count more than smaller measures on a smaller scale. But you have to do everything you can, we think. So what we did a few years ago only cuts 17% of all the CO2 emissions, and we need to go much farther. So we have to work on a bigger plan. Next slide, please. So we worked on the zero emission mobility approach for urban mobility, where, next slide, please. This is the plan, how it looks like, where we work on the transport of people, which is public transport, but also taxis and also passenger cars, privately owned and business-wise driven. We work to give the good example and to have a bit of experience. We work to clean up our municipal fleet, from garbage trucks to cars for the directors of our company. And we get a lot of experience how it works to have, for example, charging infrastructure in our office buildings or at the place where the garbage is dumped, and which is quite a big deal, I can say. So it's not very easy, but then we know what we ask the people of Rotterdam, how to cooperate with us, what it takes, and what we can help them. We work to clean the whole transport of goods chain, so the supply chain, but also the building supply chain. And there's an English, for the people who are interested, there's an English roadmap to zero emission transport of goods, where we have signed with 40 Dutch cities the agreement to go to a zero emission zone in our streets in 2025. And the way how we do that in Rotterdam is written down in the link, which is in the presentation you can download probably after this meeting. And we work on charging infrastructure for all those types of transport, for all the modes. So from passenger cars to buses to trucks, everything is in our charging plan. And we call that Rotterdam Electric. Next slide, please. Internationally, we are a member with the Dutch government and many other governments from France, Portugal, Luxembourg, Finland, etc. And also many regions and cities to the Transport Decarbonization Alliance. Our eldermans in the picture on the left. Next slide, please. We work on charging infrastructure in Rotterdam. I focus a bit more. I thought it could be interesting for you how we do that. We have at the moment more than 3,000 charge points, of which 2,500 public. We do innovative tenders where the market invests in charging infrastructure in Rotterdam, which in our vision shows there's a start of a business case for that in city, urban city surroundings. We do it demand driven, but more and more data driven. We do research and we do pilots for charging for city logistics. We're a bit less far there. We test quick chargers on, for example, Shell and Total and all those kind of gas station owners. They place quick chargers in their stations, and where there's more needed, we do tenders for all modes of transport and all types of quick chargers. We do several pilots with, for example, street plugs, plugs in street lights, inductive charging, charge squares, and we form a region with the 4 biggest cities in the Netherlands on charging, where we share knowledge and we try to work on efficiency. And when we did a benchmark how we do it, the market and also our other stakeholders as charge operators, etc., said what we do suits the demand and it's done well. So we're proud of that. And underneath the slide, there's a bit of the numbers. You see that almost every year there's a big rise in the number of users from all the charging points. There's a big rise of number of charging points. There's a rise in number of unique users, etc. Next slide, please. And also that the kilometers electrically driven, well, double each year is not. It's nearly doubled, and also the CO2 emission, which is avoided, rises year by year. Next slide, please. We work regionally on the charging infrastructure, not only for our own city, because the driving electric doesn't stop at our city border. So we work with, at the moment, 30 cities together on charging infrastructure in one big tender. And from these big tenders, the amount of demands for charging infrastructure doubles every year. And last year, I yesterday asked my colleague, in 2020, we had, at the end of the year, we had more than 5,000 demands for chargers in the streets. So there's a real demand for more charging infrastructure in our cities. Next slide, please. And this is how we do the demand-driven, but based on data. So we find out where to put the chargers in the street, and then we make a plan together with our tender partner to put chargers in the street. Next slide, please. But we also work nationally together. So, of course, our national government has also very high ambitions on zero emission vehicles. And I thought it could be nice to tell them as well, because in the Netherlands, we work together on all the policy levels on charging. And the aim of the national government is to have the sales of private cars 100% in 2030. There must be zero emission transport of people in, for example, public transport in 2025. Zero emission city logistics as well in 2025, and zero emission buses also in 2025. So that's a very high ambition, and you have to cooperate with cities and regions to reach the national ambitions. Next slide, please. So the national government works on a tax system that fits zero emission mobility. We have a national plan to work on the 1.8 million charge poles that are needed for all the 2 million full electric vehicles that are sold from 2030. That's called the National Approach of Charging Infrastructure, where we work on public charging, but also charging at home and at the company, because that's where people are during daytime, and we find out that they want to charge there. We work on quick charging, which is needed in between, or if you want to go further for occasions. And we try to do it in coordination with the energy transition. So that's there's sufficient energy where it's needed for charging the cars. And it's needed for all modalities. So not only for private cars, but also buses and the more heavy trucks, which is quite a challenge. And in a national approach of charging infrastructure, the country is divided in 6 regions, where the 4 big cities form one region. There's also a subsidy for cars and for the light vehicles, and it's since last year, and it's really a success. So I don't know if there's much left of the money. That's quite a critical thing, but it works if you give subsidy. There's many more people driving electric, so that's I think a quite successful issue. And we have to increase the findability of the charging infrastructure. It's one thing that it's there, but you have to find it. And we cooperate nationally also in the knowledge platform on charging infrastructure and in the Formula E team. Next slide, please. That's my last slide. And thank you for your attention. And if there's any questions, I would like to answer them.
Yes, thank you very much. I see one question appearing in the Q&A box. How are zero emission cars defined? Are cars driving 100% e-fuels zero emission? He's indicating that e-fuels is derived from other sources as CCU and other renewable energies.
Well, it's electric and hydrogen at the moment. And for hydrogen, we are still doing a bit research because for the medium and heavy vehicles, it's there's not enough hydrogen, which is green at the moment, and also the heavier trucks, it's not so, the CO2 emission is not so much better with gray hydrogen. So we're still in discussion to what extent we think that's good enough and what we do as a city. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yes, indeed. It's a fair answer. It's got confirmed by the person who asked the question.
Yes.
Thank you very much. There is no other questions coming up. Maybe at the end of the session. There is one. Sorry.
Yeah.
We can still take it.
Experience with BMW.
One question for the audience as well. So, can you describe the city's experience with BMW's pilot program for the plug-in hybrid EVs?
Yeah.
They were geofenced to run only on electricity in designated E-zones.
Well, I'm not running this pilot, so I'm not completely into it, but it was quite a success where we, with several plug-in hybrids from BMW, choose a geofence area, and when you enter the geofence area, you get a sign on your car, and then you can switch to the full electric mode of your car. So then in the inner city, you could drive full electric. And many of the participants did so. So you could say that it's quite a success. And we're now together with BMW, but also, for example, buses or trucks, we are thinking how can you extend the system? For example, the big distance buses, you could think of a system like that where you give a clean entrance to the inner city, but on the long distances you don't drive full electric. But we're working on next steps because it was a success.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. Then we're gonna switch. We stay in the Netherlands.
Please come and explain this to Brussels. I would love to.
Yeah, I can imagine. There is many things that we have to explain. There is also a lot of experience that we should have the possibility to share indeed. But that's also one of the reasons that we are running these webinars, that we share knowledge, we share experience, and it's not always about good practices, also the lessons learned from bad practices as well. So this brings me automatically to our next speaker, also from the Netherlands. We must admit that the Netherlands have a very driven policy towards electrification. Welcome to Art Melis. Art, are you there to kick off your presentation, please? Switch on the microphone and camera if possible.
Can you open the camera?
Yes. Well, we do hear you, and now we see
Oh.
you shortly. But
Yeah,
nevertheless, it's about your presentation.
very good. I'm here. Thank you.
Here. Thank you.
Okay. Well, very welcome to this webinar. I'm Aap Meijles, and I'm a project manager in clean mobility of the city of Utrecht, and not only zero emission driven policies, but also zero emission driven employees of the city. Can I have the next presentation? Yes, this is the city of Utrecht. I explain you a little bit about the city. Can I have the next? It's the fourth city of the Netherlands, and it's the most rapidly growing city of the Netherlands. Within 9 or 10 years, we will have more than 100,000 inhabitants, more than nowadays, and we have now 350,000 inhabitants. Can I have the next? And each day, 300,000 travelers we have every single day after the corona pandemic, I think. But before that, there were 3,000 travelers every day. Can I have this next? It's a transition and a working city also. And also we have 100,000 bicycles who roam the city throughout the day. And we are the second bicycle city in the world. Well, and we also do this for the climate goals. Let's also talk about the goals and the air quality. And we have this policy since the air quality program of 2008. And I agree with all that going to zero emission takes a long run. And also an investment program on alternative ways and alternatives, but also on measures to forbid something. And I will explain you that in the next slides. In the city, we want to have a more vividly and healthier city, but you see here also the space when we use the different types of mobility. And at the left, you see that the bikes is much less space than the cars, and especially also autonomous cars. And the bikes and the buses, it's very efficient. Can I have the next? So we have also to prioritize sustainable mobility, but also to prioritize pedestrians and bikes and public transport. And that's the general policy in the Dutch cities. And it's also a nice policy because you can have this policy when it's not so left or right-winged in the politician parties. So everybody wants to have a more healthier or vivid surrounding. And so the pedestrians and the bikes will have more space in the cities. But in the cities in Europe, these circumstances are completely different. So you can, when there is some cities as Rotterdam, they used to have much more cars than the city of Utrecht. And the scale of Utrecht is much more different than Rotterdam, and much more different than Amsterdam with 850,000 inhabitants. But you can, so in Utrecht, we had an investment program, and we still have, in to scale up the pedestrian and bike circumstances, and also to upscale public transport. Can I have the other next slide? But also in a new parking policy. So the space for the cars will diminish in in a long time period. The left photo shows us the place before the Dam in Utrecht in the 70s. And the right photo, it's from 2 years ago. So we have also we have a lower parking norm for cars, and we also have little access for cars to the city, to the inner city. Yeah, can I have the next one? And we stimulate car sharing and electric cars. So we stimulate alternatives and also cleaner mobility. And Utrecht now is a car sharing city #1 in Holland, also due to platforms. And to share cars, it's also reckoned that there will become less private cars. And on average, sharing a car is cleaner than having this private car. And the car sharing people drive less kilometers, is also examined. And we have an enthusiastic entrepreneur in our city who had the idea to connect solar panels with the charging objects in the city and connect them with the battery in the electric cars in car sharing. Can I have the next slide? And in electric cars, Lutske told something about it. The situation in 2021 is that we have 150,000 hybrid and full electric cars in the Netherlands. And the goals for 2030 is that there will be 1.6 million electric cars. And 20% of the cars will be zero emission, because we have the ambition that in 2030 all new cars will be zero emission, all personal cars. So you have to have a road to this ambition. So we have also fiscal stimulation by the national government. And Lutske told us something about a subsidy of 4,000 for new cars, and we introduced it last year. And this budget was in 1 week, it was full reserved. Can I have the next slide? And we reckoned how many cars it would be for Utrecht. And in Utrecht we have 138,000 cars for 350,000 inhabitants. And now we have 850 charging objects for electric cars, and there drive 4,700 full electric cars in Utrecht, and 3,200 hybrid cars within. But the goals are for 2030, when we want to reach 20% of all cars electric, there will be 27,000 cars will be electric at 2030. So we have to we want to have 5,000 charging objects in the public space. So this is also estimated, and a road to how do you stimulate the alternative for phasing out the diesel. Can I have the next? And also nationally, we have had agreements about zero emission public transport. There drive 5,000 public buses in Holland for public transport, and it is there are always public tenders for this for those public buses. And the governments have made an agreement in 2016 to have them a zero emission at 2025 for all new buses. So they have a phase out until 2030 for all existed buses. From 2030, all buses should be zero emission. And that's also for the phase out for city logistics. We have a national agreement and a national route to zero emission city logistics. It was signed by a national government, local governments, and the markets, the companies who work in logistics, that there will be in 30 local governments in the cities, there will be zero emission zones for city logistics starting at 2025. And there's a phase out for diesel vans. Diesel Euro 5 will be allowed to drive in the zero emission zone until 2027, and the Euro 6 diesel vans will be allowed to ride in the zero emission zones until 1 January 2028. So from 2028 there will be zero emission for logistics in 30 cities in Holland. And in Utrecht, we have also had in our coalition agreement for the coalition part that there will be a zero emission zone for mobility in 2030. Can I have the next? Yep, can I have the next? Yeah, and also the how do we do that also with this route to zero emission? Well, we realize there must be pilots, or there must be experiences with zero emission mobiles, but also clean bikes, city bikes for logistics. But so we welcome every party who wants to experience in our city for new and clean mobility. And that's an open mind. And yeah, and not in Utrecht, but in Holland, we have financial stimulations for clean cars. For personal cars, but from 2021 there will also be a stimulation to zero emission vans and freight by the national government. And for buses it's also a possibility by financial stimulation, but it's also in projects. But we can also stimulate zero emission initiatives by permission to bus lanes only for instance, a clean taxi. The public tenders for clean buses and clean mobility help us. And when it's not fast enough, we are regulated by low emission zones and zero emission zones. So in Utrecht, we introduced a low emission zone for personal and vans from diesel who are 15 years or older. And in 2021 we will make it more severe by vans and personal cars by diesel Euro 3 will be forbidden. So we scale it up once in 5 years. But the zero emission zone for logistics will be practiced at 2025. Can I have the next slide? So here you see also the regulation by zero emission city logistics. And it's quite a scheme when you see it. So it's also for heavy duty and for vans. So you see it. It's a road so that companies can get accustomed to it. And for heavy duty, we started with 10 or 11 other cities in 2008 to ban Euro 0, 1, and 2. And at 2013, we made it severe. And next year, we will ban the heavy duty in our inner cities up to Euro 5. And for the low emission zone vans, well, you can see also this scheme, but we make it much severe during 3 or 4 years. Yes, can I have the next? And also we have enthusiastic entrepreneurs in Utrecht. So we have also a car sharing entrepreneur with the solar panels and connecting it with bidirectional charging objects, and that's with We Drive Solar. So we that helps us also to have the transition to new energy, because everyone wants to have his own energy from the sun, and who can use it by yourself? Who doesn't want it? I will say, but it will be a business case, I think. Well, that will be until 2026 or 2028. That's not so easy. I can have the next slide. And also we have some projects, and here we see a project of 2,600 apartments, new apartments, and there will be car sharing. So and also connected with solar panels on the roofs. And car sharing is the new measure here. Yeah, can I have the next? And also here, a new apartment buildings in a new neighborhood, and there will be 20% car sharing of the total amount of houses and apartments. Yeah, can I have the next slide? And in a new urban area with 9,000 houses, there will be mobility as a service will be the norm. So there is priority to bikes and pedestrians and public space, and parking at a distance. So you can't park at easy, so near your house. And that will be a total different way of living, way of life. But I think we also have to face this new urban area. Also, what does it do in practice, and is it also good possible? That's quite an experience here. Yeah, can I have the next? And also a European project with Utrecht, Gothenburg, and Nice, and also experiencing with the solar panels, the energy system in the neighborhood, the restructure of this 650 social houses, and also connected with the energy system in the neighborhood. And we look what the growth in electric mobility has an effect on the energy systems. Yeah, can I have the next? Well, I'm here at the end of my presentation. I hope I will have inspired you something.
Thank you very much, Art. Indeed,
You're welcome.
nice to have your insights. And this brings me to two questions that popped up. I think they're quite linked to each other. So questions actually for both Rotterdam and or Utrecht. Do you have any programs to encourage using EVs for ride-hailing companies like Uber and Bolt? These vehicles drive 5 times as much as normal private cars, but will have special challenges around charging. So indeed, ride-hailing is a good initiative, but do you force them or encourage in a way to also be electric?
Yeah, and also they have their own CO2 reduction motives, and also they want to be fully electric from 2025, I presume. So when those companies have their aims and also want to change their fleet into electric cars or zero-emission cars, they can use also the public charging objects, but also we want to install some semi-fast charging objects. So that will be additional to the charging objects in the streets. So that will be a great opportunity for them also to use these charging objects, but also we want to cooperate with them. So what kind of locations do you need to change your fleet? So we were open to go into contact with them.
Yes. So a question which is linked on this shared car platforms or ride-hailing, how successful are they actually? Because I know by myself, indeed, in some cities they have been launched, but were not successful and then they disappear again. How is that success rate in Utrecht for the moment?
Well, the car sharing system is in Utrecht successful, but how many cars do we have? I think 200. I think from We Drive Solar, but they have also 400 bidirectional charging objects and 65 in the region, and because we see that in the city of Utrecht, we need car sharing and we need also mobility as a service, so parking at a distance. And that's also what I meant about for a change, you need a long road. So we have also a long road to change the parking norms for cars. So the inhabitants see that it's not so free anymore to have or to own a car themselves by their house. So in the inner city, the inhabitants is average for having a car is 0.38. So less than half the inhabitants in the inner city have a car. And we see lowering this average every year. And that's also a reason to have that the success for sharing a car is communicating with the lower parking norms of the city.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Maybe there are some questions that popped up later in the conversation in the chat. We'll see also how far we get in our timing. But then we're gonna go overseas. We're gonna go to Dundee City. And a warm welcome to Fraser Christian. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Been a while, a long time no see.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, warm welcome to you, and looking forward to get an update from your city.
Okay.
That you have made. Do you share the slides yourself? It should be possible with the share screen.
Yeah. Okay. Second here. Okay.
I can see them coming at least. Yes, if you put them in presentation mode, we are fine.
Is that yeah? should be it.
Yes, indeed. Great. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, a great thank you very much for allowing me to do this presentation. And the first thing I'd say is hello to Rotterdam and hello to Norway, because a lot of the things you're going to see here, you're going to say, ah, I know where they've come from, because I've been there, and I've kind of stolen it. But I think this is why this is so good, and why I'm so happy to be here, delighted to learn about other cities, etc. So my name's Fraser Crichton. I'm the Corporate Fleet Operations Manager, and I've been on this electrifying the entire city for the last 10 years. We're straight into the slide. Everybody sort of who have come on before has talked about this, which is the reason why we're changing away from combustible engines and vehicles. So just a quick update. The population of Dundee is 150,000, but significantly it's condensed into a 60 kilometres of square mile. So that's about 8 miles by 5 miles. But the key factor that I discuss here is what you're looking here on is an extinct volcano, and that's the seat. And what happened well before my time was that the fissures from that volcano went into the River Tees, you can see in the background there. And naturally what we did was we built our roads on the lowest point. Unfortunately, what that is now, the scenario that exists now in the city, on the left-hand side, you can see there that we've got 2 of the top 5 most polluted streets. But in fact, the whole city sits in a bowl. And whereas most cities and regions in the world between 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning and 4 and 5 at night, you see peaks and troughs. Unfortunately, because of the scenario that I've just outlined, we, to put no other word to it, we sit in a soup that can't escape. So we've got an extremely serious air pollution problem, and to tackle the transportation, which is one of the major polluters, we could either change our transportation or bulldozer the city flat, which was obviously quite a difficult one. So not surprisingly, we went for the first option. Talking about policies, I see that the UK government has changed that from 2040 to 2035, as Philippe showed on his slide. Scotland, for whatever reason, went for 2032, which is quite an ambitious target, as we've seen with all the other cities, etc., but one that has to be achieved given what I've just talked about. Change. I mean, the city itself, an industrial city from the 50s and 60s, went into incredible decline. However, over the last 15 years, what we've been involved in is a £1.1 billion regeneration of the city, which really means flattening the city and starting again along the river. You can see there on the left-hand side the V&A Museum. To put this into context, out of 150,000 population, 1.1 million visitors came to see it in 2019, which you can imagine would cause, on transportation level, causes quite an issue. And we've changed to the gaming industry, Grand Theft Auto, Minecraft, origins come from Dundee, very high-tech sort of businesses, and completely changing. And why I talk about this is because our evolution over to e-mobility is all part of a city that is completely changing. Similar to what I've just been hearing, what we've done is we've looked at 3 different sectors, which was our own fleet, council fleet, my fleet, leading by example, looking at businesses, the taxi industry, a big polluter, and then going on to the public. And I'll highlight all those areas coming up. On our own fleet, I'm sitting roughly about 21% of my fleet, which equates to, I mean, my fleet consists of about 1,200 vehicles. And what we've now moved on to is, as you can see in the bottom left, we've moved on to the larger electric vehicles. So I have 2 of those electric bin lorries in the city at the moment. I've ordered another 4, and significantly, I'll go on to what infrastructure is required for that, which is the key. 23% of the taxi industry is 100% electric. Another key element that I'll touch on is that we, given the city and the pollution and the serious nature of it, we really are not interested in hybrid vehicles. We want to have clean electric vehicles. Given the size of the city as well, early adoption was easier given the batteries were 100 miles. Well, the size of the city, they were always going to be able to accommodate that. And then finally, the public uptake. And I'll highlight the things that we've done for that. Just touching back on the HGV project and maybe all these projects. One thing for me about e-mobility is, especially from when I started, is the innovation in the battery technology and how these vehicles are ultimately coming out now. 150, 200 range is the norm. So and infrastructure, the hardware works. For me, a lot of it's to do now is where are we getting this energy from? I think the argument of whether we're going to move over to e-mobility is being made today, and it's been decided. It's what's the point, in my opinion, of charging, having electric vehicles running about if the electricity came from burning coal? So renewables is a huge part of my projects now, and as you can see, the charging hub at the bottom is 150 chargers. That bin lorry is a 300 kilowatt batteries. There's 5 60 kilowatt Nissan batteries on that, and there's 1,000 kVh substation there. But what I'm, as you can see in the middle there, what we're putting on is solar on top of that there at this moment on those 2 workshop buildings, and then there's a salt dome going on there, and that will produce roughly about 180 kilowatts once it's all finished. And again, it's not going to do the whole work, but it's at least it's taking away from going to the network. On the bottom right there, I've got 38 bin lorries altogether. 15 of those are situated at what is the ex-Michelin tyre factory that sadly closed in June. However, that's been reinvented as a energy park. As you can see, there's the wind turbines there, and we're going to put in 15 bin lorries in there, electric bin lorries, and they will be solely charged through the wind turbines. So obviously a full renewable system there. So that's kind of an insight into our leading by example fleet. This is the charging infrastructure that we put across there. Typically what we did was we put right at the beginning rapid chargers, single ones across the city. Significantly in the city though, that 51% of the population live in tenements and don't have a driveway, so would never be able to charge. So again, I mentioned this, but a couple of visits to Oslo, I must admit, and understanding what they did, we thought that the charging hub idea was the way forward for us in Dundee. And that also took into account the taxi industries, because they're not going to go back to their homes to charge. So they needed these hubs, so targeted at where the taxi ranks are, close as we could get to the city centre. That brought into another thing, a classic one the taxi industry used to say to me was, what if I get a fare to London? My answer was, do you ever get a fare to London? And he would say, no, but I might. But the point was that they got fares to the surrounding region, which brought me on to then having to put in, speak to the surrounding councils and say, look, can we put infrastructure into your area? We'll put it in for you. And we call them dumbbells, which obviously if you get a fare up to into Angus, neighbouring, then there was infrastructure there if you required it. This was also tandem. We've got many partnerships, but one is the NHS. So also part of this is rural hospitals and major hospitals in Perth and Dundee. So all the hospitals, we put infrastructure into them as well, in order so you get patients from the taxi industry. Taxis will take them to get minor operations, etc. And they know there's charging infrastructure as well. So that was kind of developing, and that regional strategy is really going forward. Princes Street, this is one of our 3 hubs that we've already built across the city. This was built in 2018. What you can see there is you've got 6 50 kilowatt chargers. We've got 22 kilowatts at the in the bottom left here. for slower leaving the cars to go into shopping. And predominantly the taxi industry and businesses use this rapid charging, the 650 kilowatts. So across the 3 hubs, before the lockdown, I think it was sitting at 160,000 charging sessions in the year, quite significant. And what you see there is the solar generates roughly about 50 kilowatts. It then is on the left-hand side there, goes to the battery storage system, which is Second Life Nissan battery packs, Renault battery packs, and that stores 90 kilowatts. Obviously, that doesn't, especially in the mornings when all the taxi industry come in, can't sustain it. But it peak shaves is really what it does. And interestingly, what that system does is also in the winter time, it's colder. What you get is the taxi industry come in at 9 o'clock in the summer. In the winter, they come in that bit earlier because the batteries with the weather. So the system after a couple of days works out that it's more prudent to engage roughly about 8 o'clock in the morning in the winter time, and therefore it's always looking for the most advantageous time to use that solar generated electricity. So a 4th hub has been built. I mean, right at this moment, a lot of the lessons that we've learnt on building the 3 are on board, but that 4th hub is in an area of a poorer area in the city, and it's a much more community-based hub. And it's certainly, we're looking at many solutions, especially on disabled charging, looking at access for the disabled, not only just for charging, but for actually using the facility as a whole. So that's a quite exciting project that we're involved in just now. The 3rd hub that we built, now we significantly built the hubs intentionally, sorry. The first one we built in a poor area to basically say, look, there's a low car usage here. We can put carpool vehicles in here. There's a taxi rank next to it. But this was to say that we're not all about Tesla drivers. We're all about the whole city. We put that middle one in. This was the 3rd one we put in here, which is on the west side of the city. And the east side of the city. And what this is all about is about 40,000 vehicles come in from the rural areas on a daily basis into 150,000 population. Quite a lot of people coming in to use to work and use all the shopping, etc. Now, we built this hub so that the cars can come in to go to this charging hub, leave their electric vehicles then, and then take the 3 different modes of transport that we have sitting there. So at that hub, we have electric bikes, so they can hire that electric bike, leave the car charging, or it's right next to the railway station that will take you straight into the city centre. Or preferable above all those 2 is we have a walking, as you can see top right, all the way along the coast. We've got the ability to walk into the city centre and back whilst leaving your car there. Now, last week, for example, I would not have said that anybody should take either walker or cycling into the city centre, given the weather here. So it does get a little bit cold in the wintertime here. So to expect people to do what I've just said, that's not really going to happen. So understanding that, sorry, I've missed one here. I'll get back to that scenario. But first of all, I just pointing out a few on the taxi side of it. Sorry, I've jumped a slide there. The policies that we put in, because I've been talking about the taxis quite a lot and the high take up there. As you can see, what we did was we put in policy, and we started off by looking at quite a distinction between the white plates and the yellow plates, the private hires and the hackneys. And we managed in September 2017 to get them to agree that all new private hire vehicles would go 100% electric. Now that was passed quite easily because the yellow plates, the hackney plates that sitting on the ranks, felt that they were better than the private hire ones, and this would slow the numbers down as well, etc. So it was a bit of politics going on there, but it was passed. And also for what could we do for the hackney plates, the yellow plates, we introduced company plates. So that was allowing them to get to ownership of that plate that they could no worth for the council to do that, but we did that because we saw that as a bartering system. So, but the bottom line was, if you did take up a company plate, again, it had to be 100% electric. Significantly, the NHS also with our council procurement weighted, that was a £1.1 million contract with the NHS. They weighted their procurement at, I think, 20% for EVs. And significantly, a company scooped everything because they had all EVs, and the industry went, obviously that was quite a shock to them. The free parking for taxis in Dundee and the multi-storey car parks, and reduced taxi fees for the EVs, just policies that just drive the whole thing forward. So this is getting back to the multi-storey car parks that I was just describing there. On the right-hand side, you see Broughty Ferry, where that hub that I was describing, that multimodal hub. Now, we've decided that people will come into the city centre. So what we're now thinking is, how do we encourage them to stay away from the city, the actual centre? So we have these, as you can see, the stars on the left-hand side there, which is the car parks, multi-storey car parks. And this is what we want to do. We have designed car parks, the multi-storey car parks, so that on top of them, they've got these solar canopies again. And significantly on this one, these are dynamic loaded charging. So if all these chargers could give out 7 kilowatts, but we realize that these vehicles are coming into the city and are going to be there for 7-8 hours because they're going to be working in the city centre. So the system then allows itself to, if it gets a capacity that's looking into the grid, it then reduces the charge down to roughly 2 to 3 kilowatts, still giving them the charge over those 8 hours, but staying away from the grid. On the bottom one, you can see there that we couldn't put canopies up on the second car park, so we put the solar on top of the floor. On this battery storage system, we use Tesla wall units, which then, if the cars are not there to charge, for argument's sake, the solar still looks for energy and then feeds the electricity or feeds the barrier system. It's always looking to utilize that renewables. The policies that we've I try to say benefits, and then there is enforcement. So we, on a local level, that's something that maybe national governments can't do. We've introduced a reduction in the tariffs for residents of Dundee who live there. So we do have a tariff system, but they can get a reduction if they live in Dundee. And the multi-storey car parks are free for all EVs. That's to encourage them to start utilising those multi-storey car parks and to keep them, again, those vehicles out of the city centre. All part of there have been discussions here, a low emission zone. Back to the multi-storey car parks, what we're away to do is give a reduced tariff also to people who have got EVs in the city centre to charge at night using the multi-storey car parks. And that's all about actually physically getting cars out of the city centre completely and utilising these multi-storey car parks. All EV parking, including EV hubs, are subject to traffic orders. So when I call them hubs, we've actually named them car parks, these hubs. And it's all because we want to make sure we can put traffic orders on them for the amount of time you can charge and length. We generally do not get icing on any of our parking. The parking sensors are being installed right at this moment in time to, again, reinforce that you've got 30 minutes, so we can more like nudge people to say you've had 30 minutes on that rapid charger, your time's up, you need to move on. Something that, this is touching on this 51% that can't charge in the driveways. We've been looking at many different solutions on residential charging, and we looked at lamppost charging for quite a considerable time, but unfortunately in Dundee and other places in the UK, we've actually moved our lampposts back from the edge of the pavements and ultimately putting a charging infrastructure that would cause a trip hazard. So this is something that we've been really looking at for quite a while, and now I've started to deploy in the city, which is pop-up chargers. You can see the one on the top left charging my car there. I use that every day here. Absolutely fantastic. And now we've put next to the V&A, as you can see, on a very snowy day a couple of weeks ago, we put a line, and we're going to put in 8 different sites across the city. Benefits being, obviously, the street, there's no clutter for chargers. You've also got, when repairing them, it's simply you take the lid off and you put a new unit in. a brand new unit, and away you go. You take it away, it's all in one piece. And also, certain areas do not want any street clutter, as I pointed out, vandalism, etc. So we're really keen on that one. That's a 9-month project across the city. It can't be, you know, I think everybody is probably in the same boat, all these cities that we're talking to, but you need leadership from the very top. And luckily in Dundee, I have the council leader. He's one of the youngest leaders in the UK. And as you can see there, in August 2018, he 2 petrol cars, him and his wife, traded them in and got a second-hand Nissan Leaf. And as you can see, he loves it, talks about it, but he is leading by example, and that is gold dust when doing all these things. This is the map of the city. So where we are just now is we've got all this infrastructure that I've kind of highlighted and much more. But what we're trying to do is we're mapping out the city and seeing where all the gaps are. I mean, when we talk about strategy, it's quite a difficult thing. I mean, I've strategies in 10 years. It's constantly with the innovation that's going on in both the vehicles and the infrastructure. The strategy policy is changing constantly. How do we get to the point where we understand how much charging we really need, given that the distance of travel, maybe people are only traveling 5 miles a day, you know, do we really need all these charging hubs all over the city, or are we, you know, what we don't want to do is overpopulate our city with charging infrastructure that might not be needed in the future. So it's a changing feast, shall we say, is the strategy, and I'm sure all the other cities are in the same boat. So what's going on just now is that we're mapping the whole city out, and we have the DNO, the SSE, the energy company, looking at where all the power exists at the moment and looking at the best advantageous areas to put infrastructure, given the gaps, etc., that we have. I think I heard earlier on about talking about mass. This is really what we're heading towards. We've got in the city now, as you can see, a lot of electric taxis, infrastructure. We've got car clubs in all the hubs and all across the city. We have electric bike, those stations are situated all over the city. We also now have an intercity electric coach, which runs from Dundee to Edinburgh, and we're working on a smart travel app. So the top right there is the Open, the Golf Open, which I think is watched by, I don't know, millions of people around the world, but there's 200,000 people in 4 days go to that event. So what we're looking to do is people will, Dundee is where the bulk of the tourists and golf people will be situated in hotels here. So what we're looking to do is, we say American tourist comes into London, is traveling up to Dundee. What we're saying is, here's an app, travel up in Dundee, trying to push them towards, you could electric bike, there's a route all the way to St Andrews, you could take an electric taxi, etc. Smart mobility using a major event. And the key to that is we've now got a goal. We've got a set 2022 summer for an event, and to try and bring all this together and leave it all as a legacy in the city. Key to everything that we do is the media and the communication. I mean, all the targets, we can set all them, but you need the people to come along with you. So we understood this. We get all the infrastructure you put in there. We get the company Swarco who do that. They, as community benefits, they give us money for the marketing and communication. And it's roughly now every 6 weeks, we have a double page spread within the local newspaper and just spread the message to say, look, we're doing why we're doing it, which is for our generations of the future, for the air quality, and to bring them with us. And that's the key, in my opinion, for this change. You've got to bring the population with us. We've stolen many ideas off back to Norway, where we've got our most celebrities within the city to go to EVs and to promote that, etc. And I can't emphasize enough how much that has made a difference in the uptake. So finally, some key things in Dundee for what we're doing for the future. As I pointed out here, I'm sure everybody's aware, energy is the key for deployment of the EV across and where it's sourced, as I pointed out. Long-term public and private partnerships are required really for the Scottish Government, for the whole of the country to transition. Local authorities' EV infrastructure strategies require, as I pointed out, flexibility. You know, if you saw that my strategy 10 years ago, you would just look, what are you talking about? I mean, to try and keep up, you've got to keep up with it. And as pointed out in a couple of other presentations, you know, I hate the usage of electric vehicles. I generally call them energy source on four wheels, because that's what they are. We now have the ability to put that energy and that new EVs into the buildings, and the buildings back to the cars, and it's all about moving that across the city and developing that. So I think that's the most exciting development of all this. And that's it. We're finally just saying that this, you know, Philippe, as well he knows, in 2018 we won an award for the Europe's most innovative EV city. That has been incredible for us to promote that, and other cities have been so interested in how we got there. So again, a big thank you to the organization.
Thank you. Exciting, actually, because indeed we awarded you a while, some years ago, and I was very pleased that it brought forward the exposure of the mobility trajectory you have been doing. I mean, what a journey! If you see where you started so many years ago and where you are today. So I'm very happy to see the continued process on this, and still the efforts that are being made. And my lesson learned, and I think it's a very good message, is leading by example, and the leadership. Bringing that good example is key to success, definitely. It's a very good lesson learned. You cannot aim for something without and ignoring it at the same time. I saw one question coming here that was directed to you. How all those vehicles in Dundee are being charged? Are they being charged on private charge points, or they are also using public ones?
So the majority of them are yeah, this stems back to Dundee, and when I talked about it right at the beginning about the 50s and the 60s, one key thing that happened was really nobody wanted to know Dundee in that period of time. It was kind of left to its own devices. So what has benefited us now is that we retain lots of the land and a lot of the assets. So all the ones, the charging infrastructure that you've seen there, all the car parks, we own them as a council. So the key to this is we have control. And I know that's not the norm across Europe, etc., and certainly not in the UK, but we have the ability, and it's probably another key element of why I've managed to get so much done so quickly, is that we own them, we own the assets, and therefore we have control. So it's mostly public. Yeah. Sorry, it's mostly owned, yeah, public, owned by Dundee City Council.
Yeah, and another question that I was wondering, you mentioned free parking for EVs, and that you have really organized that system. Does it also mean free charging, or how is that arranged?
Yeah, so what we put in place, this goes back to we have a pot of money for.
I think we lost you. The connection in my.
You know, for free parking. So we're using our own internal money to promote it.
We lost you for a second. Maybe you go back a bit.
Sorry, am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. So we utilize this funding, internal funding, to subsidize this. So when we come about free parking, now I touched on it there. Dundonians can, if they've got an EV, apply to get a subsidy. That subsidy, I'm just going to tell you, Philippe, that the subsidy is 100%. So they do get free electricity, but we don't really promote it, but we say if you want. Now, that has taken, the uptake on that, on EV drivers, is only around about 10%, because people actually think they should pay for it in Dundee, but we give them that option. If they're struggling, if somebody says, look, the value to buy an EV is so much different, we need to give them that whole life costs. This gives them ability to do it. But I go back to that messaging and marketing and telling people why we're doing it. We've actually only had a 10% uptake on that free electricity, because people in Dundee say we should be paying for it. which coming from a Scotsman is something else.
Yeah, good question. If it would be applicable for all Europe, I'm afraid not. But thank you very much for your contribution. You mentioned also one of our leading examples that inspired you. I understood. Brings us to Oslo City, and I'm very pleased to welcome Sture Portvik in our webinar. The leading city with indeed an internal combustion engine ban, very close coming. Sture.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for kind words. Yeah, Fraser, it was nice. I will share a presentation. My name is Sture Portvik. I'm the manager for electromobility in Oslo. That makes my days pretty busy, but it's extremely interesting. But I will show a presentation.
Yes, go ahead.
Yep, I will share it now.
You can put it in presentation mode.
Yeah, I will.
Very good readable for everyone.
You can see it?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay, yes, I'm from the city of Oslo, and thank you for inviting me, Philip, and thanks to my colleague. It was really inspiring to listening to you good ideas all around. Well, in Oslo, we are trying to have only zero emission transport from 2025. So it started way back then. In 2008, we had a plan, a 10-point plan to reduce CO2 emissions. And together with our good colleagues from the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, we were early birds, and we actually wanted to promote EVs. So the speaker from Dundee, Fraser, presented it pretty good, because you need communication. You need to get a message out to the people. So you can see down at the left on the slide, down left, it's in front of the city hall. It was a big, huge EV parade, and it was way back in 2010. Already then we started to promote it. Well, it's really not rocket science. It's a lot of EVs in Norway, and the reason is, of course, the incentives. You have to make EVs cheap to buy, no purchasing tax, no VAT, and also cheap to use. And also practical and convenient. That means charging infrastructure. You can see an example down to the right. If you look at a typical EV, like in e-Golf, you can see that the price in Norway without taxes is quite similar to the combustion type. And that's extremely important. Up to the right, well, there's a little bit fun picture. It's from LA PD, who are also doing EVs. Down to the right, you can see that all the incentives were actually in place in the 90s, but nothing did happen, because you need to make an EV cheap to buy, cheap to use, and practical and convenient, but you also need the right product. So in 2011, things are really picking up. And the reason for that is called Nissan Leaf. It soon became one of the most popular models. Later, you could see the same with the e-Golf, and later with the Tesla S model. So at the moment, where are we? Well, 79% of all new cars sold last year in Oslo were actually electric. That was included 63% battery electric, zero emission, and 16% plug-in hybrids. This means that 3 out of 4 cars sold last year were actually electric, and that's fantastic. And it shows that green taxes are actually working for people, but you have to make it affordable for common people to actually take green choices in their daily life. Down to the left, you can see the 4 most popular models in 2020, all electric, of course. To the right, well, that's not so nice. That's a headline in the newspaper saying opt out, opt out, opt out, meaning occupied, 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 showing that it's very, very hard to find a free charging spot in the city. Okay, here you can see a figure showing the green one is the battery electric. So you can see last year, 54%, more than half of all new cars is electric. The blue one is the plug-in hybrids. And you can see that the diesel and gasoline has diminished from 90% in 2010 to less than 20% last year. Okay, how much is this really? Well, if you compare to other cities, countries, you can see that Norway is pretty high up there. But fortunately, people are moving along and others are picking up. So that's good. Not the least the Netherlands and Iceland. Yeah. Last year, if you look at the 20 most sold cars, 16 were battery electric and 3 were plug-in hybrids. Only 1 was a gasoline. And I think if you look at the new promising models for 2021 and forwards, you can see a lot of new interesting models that is not yet on the market. And this will actually just increase everything because you need a good product. Okay, if we look at emission today, we can see in this, we can see the national plan to actually reduce CO2 emission. And we can see that road transport is really at focus, but also electrification of maritime sector and also CCS catching of CO2. So the national goal at the moment is to only have electric cars in 2025. It's not far from now, but yeah, we are on the way. And 100% of all vans less than 3.5 ton is supposed to be electric or hydrogen, and 100% of heavy vans and trucks within 2030. So that's a little bit more timeline. And yeah, all the buses, of course, in 2025 within the cities. Okay, how do you do that? Okay, you need a lot of public policy instruments. It's a big frontal sweep. You need an abundant toolbox of instrument. So it's purchase of zero emission vehicles. Of course, no purchasing tax, which is very high in Norway. No VAT, you save like 25%. And you have different support schemes, especially for commercial vehicles like taxis, vans and trucks, and also, of course, construction machinery. Also, you need charging. And public tender is actually a very important key. Today, if you have 3 companies that can deliver a product with the zero emission transport, we have to choose zero emission transport. All the plans are to the right, not going into details, but of course also a lot of user advantage, free parking, free electricity, the possibility to use the bus lane and stuff like that. But also, of course, like in the Netherlands, zero emission zone is coming. In 2008, we made a car-free city center inside Ring 1, which is the core of the city center, where private cars are not permitted. Also, we are increasing within this year or next inside Ring 2, which is 30% of the city, and within 2028, also it will include Ring 3, everything inside Ring 3. And of course, the city's own fleet is going to be 100% electric, walking like you're talking, leading by example. It was mentioned by Dundee, extremely important. Down to the right, also it's important to stress all the ferries, all public transportation has to be zero emission. The goal is to do that within 2028. The buses is the main obstacle. We have 1,800 of them, At the moment, 400 is electric, but within a few years, all will be electric. And of course, only zero emission taxis from 2024. And also, like in Dundee, we are doing green mobility houses, and everything is moving so extremely fast. So we are also looking into innovative projects. Okay, boosting of EV sales, blessing or a curse? Well, that depends on who you're talking to. If you look to the left, you can see the taxi, now the bus lane, because the EVs could actually use the bus lane until recently, all day, all year. The problem was that it's no buses left. It was congestion in the bus lane. So we had to change it a little bit. So we switched to a situation where you need 2 persons in the car to drive in the bus lane. And down to the right, this, of course, new regulations means creativity among the users. This guy was stopped the first day after the ban of one in the car in the bus lane with an inflatable doll. But I guess the fine was pretty high, so that was a one time, I guess. Okay, we need public charging points. At the moment, we have 2,100 normal charging points in the street of Oslo and 300 quick chargers. We, as in the Netherlands, went from a demand-driven situation to a strategic deployment of chargers. Up to the left, you can see the number of vehicles we have to charge within a few years. So it's a quite ambitious goal, so we have to move fast. Also, quick chargers, more and more important. They don't take up so much space, so we are doing joint ventures with private sector. We are sharing the cost, and we are also sharing the profits from that one. So we see that it's quite profitable. Down to the right, you can see one of the major hubs we opened with private sector 2 years ago, and now it's upgraded 3 times, but these pictures was actually taken 5 minutes after the opening, and already at that stage it was 3 customers. So that's fantastic. Here is an important message. Of course, the cheapest way to do it is actually not only to have public charges, but also support the housing corporations. So we have a subsidy scheme, which is extremely popular, where we have subsidized more than 60,000 private charging points in private housing associations. And the result, of course, DNB made an analysis saying that 20% of all cars are battery electric at the moment. Also, they think that the policy have given 250,000 more EVs in Norway at the moment than it otherwise would be the case. But not going into details here, but sky is the limit or trouble in paradise. I have to be honest here. Things are moving fast, so sometimes I feel a little bit like the lady down to the right running after the train in the morning, and the train is going faster and faster every day. So we have a problem with the huge demand for new chargers. We have limited space, like in most urban Europe. Also, there are a limitation on the grid capacity, and we are, as all of you, struggling with red tape and bureaucracy. And of course, 61% of the citizens are actually living in multifamily buildings and apartments. And 30% doesn't have their own parking. So that's a challenge. And of course, the really big question now is how can we do the same for professional users of EV? So we are trying to speed up everything, especially when it comes to freight vehicles. So we made some beautiful hubs together with private sectors, with tailor-made hubs for large trucks. Down to the left, you can see our Prime Minister opening one hub, and making it possible for one of the largest transporter in Oslo to actually drive zero emission with all transport within the city from next year. So this is important. It's important to test out. Here you can see some interesting pictures. we have these huge tip trucks which have a problem because they have to use ordinary quick chargers, and you can see hidden beneath them are some smaller EVs trying to charge. So we have to make things a little bit more efficient and streamlined for those vehicles. So yeah, last week it was a huge report which are looking upon the policy to actually policy instruments to increase all zero emission freight vehicles. And one interesting finding was that even if a very, very small amount of the trucks today, less than 1% are electric and 3% biogas of the large trucks, if you ask the transported, all things that within 2025, 22% will actually be electric. So we are getting there. Okay, all the taxis have to be zero emission. And of course, building sites, extremely important because they represent a huge quantity of emissions. All the buses, this is from a depot where, I think 120 buses can charge at the same time. And buses important, but also new green mobility, as you learned from Dundee. And of course, innovative products. We are testing out with JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, some inductive charging, quick charging for taxis. It will open within a month. I'm looking forward to that one. And we have to find, pull-up chargers. Fantastic idea. We stole from our friends in UK, but I also saw them on your presentation from Dundee, Fraser, so that's extremely interesting. And of course, we want to test out inductive charging also for larger vehicles like trucks and buses. We think it could be a game changer. But of course, we don't want too much cars, so public transportation is hard for me to say so, but public transportation is king, but you need clean public transportation. Also, we're doing a lot for pedestrians and cyclists. And yes, we are looking into mass solutions, mobility as a service. And of course, all vans and trucks must be electric, and the taxis, of course. A way to do that is low emission zones in combination with incentive, infrastructure, but also, of course, subsidies. And a lot of plans will actually help paving the way for the EVs. Already from 2017, on the most polluting days, it's a ban on the use of diesel cars, so that helps. And also Car-Free City Center helps. Also, we increase the congestion tax for ICTs from 2017, and we were putting up a lot of new toll gates in and out of the city. And of course, for commercial vehicles, it's still zero emission. It's still free to pass in the toll roads in and out of the city. So we make their TCO much nicer. But in the future, everything has to be electrified, even the planes. And that's really taking range anxiety up to new heights, literally speaking. So we're looking forward to that. That's in 2036 for all domestic flights. Down to the left, it's a huge container ship that is going to be autonomous and is going to go from one side of the Oslo fjord to the other with a number of containers, reducing the need for large trucks and trailers. Up to the right, you have inductive charging of buses. Down to the right, you have an autonomous minibus driving in Svalbard together with the polar bear. So that's a beautiful sight. So in the future, we have to electrify all the transport sector, literally. So that's it from me. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Sture. Impressive. Huh? It's a long time ago that I managed to go to Oslo, but the change is continuing. So indeed, impressive. I have a few questions for you that raised during the presentation. First of all, yeah, electrification of the fleets is really happening, but I see also that plug-in hybrids are no longer that popular anymore, that the number isn't even decreasing. Any specific reasons?
Yeah, it was a change in the financial incentive scheme in 2018 because the plug-in hybrids were too attractive for buyers for consumers to buy. Because we, like Dundee, we really want to go all the way to zero emission, not only plug-ins, but we accept that, especially for car owners with only one car, with a cabin up in the mountain and long distance traveling, plug-in is a good alternative, but we really want to have zero emission if possible. Yeah. So that's the reason.
Okay. Yeah, it's also a lesson learned from other countries that sometimes plug-in hybrids are bought for financial or other incentives, but not for the reason of being the electric part. So that's an important lesson learned. You mentioned also about issues about deliveries. Is that a broader aspect of deliveries? Is it is a lack of EVs coming on the market? Is there a higher demand than there is an offer? Or do you see that also on the charging infrastructure side?
Yeah. It's actually, I have to be honest there. You know that we use public tenders to try to make people switch to, for instance, large trucks and tip trucks driving away from construction sites to electric. The problem for them was that it was very hard to find suitable quick charging opportunities because many of the quick charging stations were too narrow. These are huge vehicles, 10 meters or more long and so on. So they were not that suitable. So they had really a hard time. So now we had to do some, we had to put down some fires, I guess, and try to just solve it out. And that's is the strategy has been a little bit thinking while running. We have trying to give the right incentive for consumer to switch, but sometimes, of course, you meet some hurdles. So at the moment, we have realized that we have to actually make sure that we are tailor-making consolidation centers, like the one I mentioned in my slides, and also tailor-made quick charging solutions for larger trucks. Fortunately, big manufacturers are coming. So like Volvo, Scandia, and MAN and so on, and Daimler. So we are very happy about that because, the product is nearly there. So at least in quantity, that it's makes it possible also for the larger vehicles to play a part in the zero emission race. So it's taking some time, but I'm very optimistic, actually.
Okay. I see a question coming from the audience. I also have to put it in the context. You can indeed see that you have been front runners, and Rome is not has been built in one day. I think Oslo not either. So, but it's a bit a chicken and egg question when it comes to charging infrastructure problems in Oslo. Occupied. This is a surprise. Was it foreseeable, or was it not being possible to solve it in a certain time frame that this could be avoided?
You can always do things smarter, more organized, but then you use much more time. You need much more time to actually have a sometimes you have a long, let's say 5 to 7 year plan, but that takes too much time. What we did was actually in 2008 putting out 200 chargers, and I think it was like 50 EVs in the city. So it was really heaven for the EV drivers. And of course, parking were free, electricity were free. So what we did in 2008 when it was a big pressure on the public charger was actually to have a short fee for charging. So you had to pay a little bit. And people accepted that because that really made the use more practical and convenient, and it actually turned the page. And now it's okay. I think at the moment 2,100 public chargers. Normally its occupy ratio is about 30%. So it's there, it's manageable. But I think the key has been actually to give subsidy schemes to private housing associations and organizations, because we supported like 60,000 chargers on private ground, and that's makes it so much easier and less costly for the city, of course, because then we subsidize like 50% of the investment cost, and the investment cost was typically 1,600 euros instead of putting up public chargers, which is 10 times more expensive. So it's possible to do it. Yeah,
that's a good it's a good tip, because we know that indeed in the beginning the most EV owners are also private parking owners, that they charge indeed at home. But of course, at a certain moment you come on a tipping point that you have to switch also or incentivize people that don't own private parking spots.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, you're doing it, and it's feasible, and that's an important message. That it's no reason to reject or withhold any plans towards zero emission mobility.
absolutely. That's the message, I think, because it's possible, it's already happening. So yeah, we hope that people will just copy and do it even better than us. Yeah.
Then I think we can conclude our webinar from today with this message: just do it.
Just do it. I'm not selling shoes, but EVs. But yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the speakers from today. Fraser, Art, Lutske. It was a pleasure to have you on board today. We keep on continuing this discussion in the coming months. We talk indeed this year, the team from AVERE is indeed the end of the Ice Age. I'm almost lost in my own presentation here. The end of the Ice Age, it will be this century indeed, meaning that we don't continue on the internal combustion engine. If it's possible, yes or no, that we will see. But it's also depending definitely on the policymakers, and we are definitely waiting for them on the bringing the important message. That brings me also that you can follow our next upcoming webinars. There is also focus on the life cycle of EV batteries and recycling and what's at the end of this stage. We have a partner event on raw materials on the site from Australia, but also about air quality. What is it about? What are we doing? A bit back to the roots. Driving an electric vehicle is indeed fun and nice to do, but we need to keep in mind what's the reason why we are doing this. So what's the meaning of clean air or NOx emissions from vehicles? Then there is a lot of EU policy coming on this year. One of them is the review of the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Directive. This is on the European Commission level. We're really looking forward on the state of play. And already in June, we are hoping to bring more news from the EVS, the Electric Vehicle Symposium that we are running with our partners, which will be happening this year in China. Probably not live, but we still hope to share some insights and messages from also one of a continent that is leading on electromobility. Thank you very much. Big applause for all of you, and we definitely going to meet in the near future. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.